Today we're going to learn what's called the distributive property. And this property is very commonly used in algebra. So you might remember when we have something like this, by the order of operations, you need to solve inside the parentheses first. Remember your order of operations? Okay, you have to do the parentheses first before you do multiplication. So inside the parentheses, that becomes 8. And then we have 2 times 8 equals 16. So this would simplify, this equation right here would simplify to 16, or would equal 16. But another way, I'm just going to write the same problem down here. Another way that you can solve this is that you can distribute the 2 to both parts inside the parentheses. So that means you're doing 2 times 5, doing 2 times 5, 2 times 5, and then there's a plus in between, and then you're doing 2 times 3. Let me actually color code this better. So let me write the 2 a different color here. So what you're doing here is you're multiplying each of the numbers in here by 2. Okay, because 2 is being multiplied out here. So you're basically doing 2 times 5 plus 2 times 3. So we have the 5 plus 3. Still have the 5 plus 3, but we're doing times 2 to both of them. Because outside the parentheses, there was times 2. And if you do this, what is 2 times 5? That's 10. Plus, that's 2 times 3 is going to be 6. And you'll notice that you'll get the same answer as you did before. So this is another way of solving this kind of problem. And this is called the distributive property. Because you are distributing the 2 to both the 5 and the 3. Now, a couple of warnings I would like to give you for using the distributive property. If it was like this, 2 plus 5 plus 3, you can't distribute the 2 to 5 and the 3 because this is a plus, not a times. Okay? If there's a plus or a minus, then you can't use the distributive property. You can only use distributive property if it's multiplying or dividing. So this part is multiplying. In this case, you can distribute the 2. Okay, so this part is okay. This part is not okay. Okay. Now another thing you need to be careful about. Let me erase this part. Is if you are multiplying, but inside they're also being multiplied like this. In this case, you can't distribute. Because this part is okay, because this part is multiplying, but inside you're also multiplying. So you can't distribute the 2 to both 3 and the 5 and the 3 here. You can only use distributive law when something is being multiplied and inside the parentheses it's addition or subtraction. Okay, so this this is the only case of the cases that I've written here. This is the only case where you can use distributive property. If you have a question, oops. If you have a question like this, so if you had 2 plus 5 plus 3, you can just simply add them. You can just simply add this. So that's going to be 2 plus 8, and then that's going to be 10. Notice if you distribute the 2 here, and do 2 plus 5 plus 2 plus 3, that's going to give you a bigger number. Right? That's going to be 7 plus 5 is going to give you 12, which is not the correct answer. Or if you have a question like this one, 5 times 3, you can just simply multiply them. So that's going to be 15. So 2 times 15, that's going to be 30. And if you distribute the 2 here, you're going to get, so 2 times 5 times 2 times 3, you're going to get a big number. That's going to be 10 times 6. You're going to get 60, right? And this is not the correct answer. Okay, so let me arrange this a little bit better here. So these are the cases where you can't use distributive property. Right? You can only use distributive property if there's a multiplying or multiplication or division outside the parentheses, and inside the parentheses it's either addition or subtraction. That's the only time when you can use distributive property. So let's try a few other cases here. If we have 3 times 1 plus 5. Can you use the distributive property here? Yeah, outside the parentheses we have multiplication. Inside the parentheses we have addition. So we can use the distributive property here. And using the distributive property, we're going to get, so the first part here is going to be 3 times 1. 3 times 1 plus the second part here. It's going to be 3 times 5. That's going to be 3 plus 15, which equals 18. Or let's have another example. 2 times 3 times 4. Can you use the distributive property here? If you said no, you're correct, because even though this part is multiplication, the part inside the parentheses is also multiplication. This needs to be addition or subtraction if you were to use distributive property. So you can't use the distributive property here. But you can still solve this. You can just multiply 3 times 4. That's going to be 12. And then multiply that times 2 to get 24. But you're not using the distributive property here. Okay, how about 3 times 5 minus 2? Can you use the distributive property here? And if you said yes, then you're correct, because this part is multiplication. Inside we have addition or subtraction. In this case it's subtraction. Okay, so you can use the distributive property. And if you distribute the 3 to 5, 3 times 5, and this time it's minus, so you're doing minus 3 times 2. Okay, so that's going to be 15 minus 6, which is going to equal 9. Okay, so that's what's called the distributive property. And later on, actually, you use this more often with variables. So let me give you an example with a variable here. Let's say we have 2 times, actually let's not use an x for multiplication, because I'm going to be using x as a variable. So 2 times 2x plus 3 equals 26. Okay, so we can simplify this part first, and you can use a distributive property here. Actually, let's have just x here instead of 2x to simplify things a little bit. Okay, so we can use distributive property because this part is multiplication or division, and this part is addition or subtraction. So we can use distributive property. We can do 2 times x plus 2 times 3. So we have 2 times x plus 2 times 3. And that equals 26, right? And 2 times x, you can't really simplify that, so we just get 2x. Plus 2 times 3 is 6. That equals 26. And now we can solve this equation. You do the opposite of what's being done to the side with the x, so minus 6 on both sides. This is going to cancel. So we have 2x equals 26 minus 6 is 20. Again, we do the opposite to both sides. So x is going to equal 20 divided by 2, which is 10. So x is going to equal 10. So we can even use distributive property when there are variables. Okay, so let's just to familiarize ourselves with the distributive property, let's do a few problems. 5 times something plus something gives us 10 plus 15. And what should go inside these blanks here? Okay, so we're using the distributive property here. If you use the distributive property to get this part, you multiplied 5 times the first number. To get this part, you multiplied 5 times the second number. So what do you think the first number should be if when you multiply 5 times that first number, we got 10, right? So what do you think that number should be there? If you said 2, that's correct. Because if there's a 2 here, then 5 times 2 is going to give you 10. How about the second number? 5 times that second number gave you 15. Okay, so that means that second number should be 3. Okay, so this is kind of using distributive property in reverse order to deduce what the original question would have been. Okay, let's try one more example like this. 4 times something minus something equals 16 minus 8. What should the two numbers be? And again, the first number, 4 times that first number gave you 16. So the first number, 4 times what equals 16? And you'll remember that 4 times 4 equals 16. So that first number should be 4. The second number, 4 times the second number gave you 8. Okay, 4 times what equals 8? And you'll remember that 4 times 2 equals 8. So the numbers that we had originally were 4 and 2. Okay, so just familiarize yourself with the distributive property. Just remember when you can use distributive property and how to use distributive property to both solve questions and also to deduce what the original question was.